Good morning. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Happy Wellness Wednesday. I am super excited about today's topic. I hope you all are having a fabulous morning. If you are just stumbling on my page, my name is Donna. I am a mom, a nana, a girlfriend, a jazzercise and running fanatic, an activewear fanatic, and I am a grad student studying for my Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling. And I started Wellness Wednesday because I have been on a lifelong journey with anxiety and depression. And I have found over time that peer support, which basically means sharing what's worked for me, learning from others about what's worked for them, seems to be the best way for us to learn and evolve in our own journeys. So I started Wellness Wednesday, and as such, with that in mind, I encourage you to interact. I encourage you to ask questions. I encourage you to drop comments. I encourage you to stay positive. We try to keep it politics and negativity free. I know that's difficult to do, but this is real information, and it's not designed to create a divide or to highlight anything going on currently. Except that a lot of times we do talk about mental health, and mental health is a big issue right now. So just keep in mind, I ask you to let me know if you're here. If you don't see this till afterwards, to hit hashtag replay in the comments. But sometimes Facebook doesn't show me all of the things. Sometimes you can comment and ask questions and I never say a word, and it's because I didn't actually see it. Sometimes Facebook pops it up on my screen. Sometimes it doesn't. For example, right now I have one eyeball that says somebody's watching, but it hasn't told me who. So if I don't respond, if I don't respond while I'm live, it's not because I'm ignoring you. It's because I didn't see you, and I will definitely respond in some form or fashion after the fact. So last week's video was about Halloween safety tips. It was actually, good morning, Miss Carla. It was actually kind of a part two. Every year I do some kind of Halloween thing. And the first year was some tips and safety things. And then this year's kind of expanded into more of the wellness side, the mental side of Halloween. And you can find both of those videos on my page, and I linked them both. I linked last year's into this year's, but I will also drop a link in the comments for this year's. I know Halloween is past, but there's still some great ideas in there and some things we can learn for next year. So this week we're going to shift back. Halloween is fun, but we're going to shift back into talking about things that affect wellness. And this particular topic has kind of been a thorn in my side for a while. We're going to talk about common mental health terms / conditions that are commonly misused. And if you know anything at all about the mental health field, chances are you probably get a little torqued, like I do, when you see people say, "Oh, she's so bipolar," or "Oh, I'm so OCD," when it's clear that they don't necessarily understand the meanings and implications of those terms. So that's the topic I wanted to touch on today. Now, there's probably 10 to 12 commonly misused health terms or diagnoses that are just used wrong and used casually all the time. But there are 5 top ones that I'm going to address today out of those. Good morning, Miss Selena. And it's important to know that the reason this is, mental health is a hot topic. And when we use terms that we don't understand in ways that aren't appropriate, we are diluting the topic. We are diluting the importance of it. Mental health terms are often used casually, out of context, and they cause misunderstandings and they perpetuate stigma. Each condition has unique characteristics, and we need to understand those so that we can help those who truly need it instead of attributing it to personality traits. So I'm going to start with anxiety and depression because obviously that's what brought me here today. People often use anxiety to describe any feeling of worry or nervousness they have, and depression to describe temporary sadness. In reality, clinical anxiety involves persistent, intrusive worry and physical symptoms like rapid heart rate or shortness of breath, often unrelated to any specific cause. I know that for me, a lot of times, even if I don't realize that I'm feeling it, that I won't say feeling anxious because that's really not the right terminology, because I do suffer from anxiety. Although I consider myself to be in recovery, it's still a daily practice for me to maintain, if you will. And one of the things, one of the flags that I have that I know that things are affecting me even when I don't think they are, is that I get dry mouth. I don't necessarily get the rapid heart rate. Sometimes I do, not the shortness of breath, but I get dry mouth. And dry mouth is a flag for me. If I haven't been taking any over-the-counter allergy meds, dry mouth is a flag for me that something is taking hold. Depression also involves prolonged feelings of hopelessness, lack of energy, and diminished interest in daily activities. Now, this goes on for weeks or months, not just feeling down. Good morning, Miss Cynthia. So these are important differentiations. We can be sad about something that's recently happened, the loss of a loved one, and grief is a real thing. But clinical depression goes beyond that. It persists for weeks, sometimes months, and it actually impacts our daily function. Anxiety, same thing. We can feel nervous about something that's upcoming, but when that nervousness impacts our daily function, good morning, Miss Denise, then it may be a bigger problem, especially if it's impacting daily function on a regular basis over a long period of time. So feeling sad or anxious is different than the debilitating experience that can occur of either of these. Some examples of my own experiences with depression and anxiety is literally having to fight myself to get out of bed in the morning, to do the minimal things that I know I need to do. That's on the depression side. Although in the last couple of decades, I've experienced more on the anxiety side and less on the depression side. And on the anxiety side, it's looked like, well, and I've told this story. This is one of the best examples I can give you, of a physical or visual example, because a lot of times it goes on in our heads. It's literally in our heads, not figuratively, because it's a brain spin. If you had to describe it, it would look like a hamster going out of control on the wheel, in a negative thought loop. But the physical manifestation for me, one of the biggest moments that really changed things for me was when I kind of borderline had a meltdown in front of my daughter and a friend of hers when they were teenagers, when I was supposed to go meet someone that I was considering dating at a bonfire down the street. And I was literally walking in circles, freaking out, coming up with all the reasons why I needed to not go and all the things that were going to go wrong. And what was I thinking? And how could I get out of this cul-de-sac without anybody seeing me? Those kinds of things. And these kinds of things, especially in terms of social anxiety, went on quite frequently, not in view of anyone, before a speaking engagement, before I had to even be in a small group of people. These kind of physical reactions, the racing heart, the spinning brain loop, and the circling and pacing and trying to figure out an escape route and all of that. That goes beyond a little bit of nervousness before, yes, the dry mouth, Carla. A lot of times that's not necessarily listed as a symptom of anxiety or of an anxiety attack, but dry mouth is very much, and don't quote me on this because I don't have the empirical evidence to back it up, but dry mouth is very much an effect of that increased adrenaline kicking in and that increased cortisol kicking in, that happens when we're in that fight, flight, or freeze response. So, like I said, that's just a small example of one of my experiences, and that was kind of the one, because it was the first one that happened in front of other people, where it was visible to other people that something was not working correctly up here. And that was one of the light bulbs for me that I needed to find a way to fix it. And I didn't know about NAMI support groups. The support group that I had been going to since my divorce had disbanded. That's a long story in of itself, but related to mental health stigma. I'm just going to put that out there. And I didn't know about all these things. So I was literally trying, and I didn't have insurance, so I couldn't seek mental health help that was covered by insurance. So I was just kind of trying to figure out how to handle it myself. which is kind of lonely and no longer necessary because there's a lot of options out there, just so that you know. So like I said, feeling sad or anxious for a short period of time is a lot different than debilitating experiences that prevent. I would have days where I had so much to do and I would be so caught up in what I had to do and the reality of it that I would never actually get started because I would just be spinning in circles, both figuratively and literally, trying to figure out where to start and convincing myself that it was never going to be all done, so it was pointless to start. And it's just, like I said, when it intrudes in daily function, that is when it becomes something that's worth seeking help for and possibly a real diagnosis. Although I'm not a fan of labels, and we'll get there in a minute. So the next one I want to talk about is bipolar disorder. And this one really, really kind of makes my head want to explode because I hear a lot of people, I've heard it more times than I can count, that refer to themselves or others as bipolar because they're a little moody or because they're experiencing emotional swings. They might be emotional swings that come along with menopause, that come along with PMS, and those are all real things, but they are not bipolar illness. They are absolutely not. Bipolar illness is something that for the most part requires medication to treat it, and it has very specific and distinct criteria to fit. So just because somebody was crying a couple of minutes ago and laughing a couple minutes later does not make them bipolar. In fact, I used to have what was known as the Norplant. It was a birth control implant. And after my second one, they said, no more, you can't have this anymore. And I was having problems with it anyway. But I had a reaction to the local anesthetic they used on me when they took it out. There was a situation that arose where I was put on birth control, a different form of birth control right before, a couple weeks before this was pulled out to make sure I was protected. And just for the record, all of this was not about birth control. It was about endometriosis symptoms. So that I was covered before they pulled out this implant, and then they gave me a local anesthetic that had epinephrine in it, and I had a bad reaction to it. And because I think they had to dose me a little bit harder because I was starting to feel the process of taking the implant out. And so what happened was about a 48-hour whirlwind of excessive hormones and then a huge hormone drop because the implant was pulled out, in addition to a reaction to the epinephrine. And basically what happened was I was literally going from crying to laughing and back again inside of minutes. Did that mean I was bipolar? No, it meant that I was having a reaction to the epinephrine and the excessive increase and drop in hormones. Good morning, Miss Marie. So there are a lot of things that can happen that can cause moodiness or emotional swings. It's not uncommon for somebody who is grieving to be crying one moment and laughing the next. There's a lot of things behind that, but that does not make moodiness and emotional swings does not make a person bipolar. Bipolar disorder involves distinct episodes of mania or hypomania and depression that last for days, weeks, or even months. Mania is going to involve extreme energy, impulsivity, and sometimes very risky behavior, whereas the depressive episodes are going to be marked by deep sadness, fatigue, and disinterest in everything. So I actually have known a few people who I knew to be bipolar, one of whom was not interested in being medicated for it. And a lot of times, sadly, some of our greatest artists, in various genres have come out, have been bipolar, and their most creative moments have been in that mania stage. But a lot of times, and there's different types of bipolar illness. I'm not going to dig into all those weeds today, but when I say mania, I mean way up there, grandiose illusions, maybe days without sleep, followed by, that includes excessive shopping or excessive working or, a lot of times a production of massive amounts of ideas, artwork, and so on. And then that's followed by weeks of bills coming due for shopping that shouldn't have been done, of depression, of no interest whatsoever in the artwork, of not even wanting to be around or see the same people they were interested in before that low hit. So these behaviors are very distressing and they feel beyond the person's control. But bipolar is not about rapid mood shifts, although there is a rapid cycling version. Again, not going to get into those weeds. It's not about rapid mood shifts. It involves substantial, longer-term mood episodes that significantly impact functioning. And those, again, there's those key words, significantly impact functioning. I was diagnosed with high functioning anxiety and depression. And basically what that meant was, for the most part, I was dealing with it, but I was able to function through basic normal daily activities until I wasn't. And then it was very, very, overwhelming. But again, I was able to function for the most part, which led to me believing that there was not really anything seriously wrong. Until I started to see where it was impeding in my function. So a lot of these disorders significantly impact functioning. So again, I cannot stress enough, somebody being a little moody does not mean they're bipolar. It just doesn't. And it's important to understand these terms and really understand what those disorders look like, and do your research rather than just throwing the term around for anybody that is a little bit moody here and there. Another very popular one, number 3, is OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder, not to be confused with obsessive compulsive personality disorder. They are in fact different. And I, again, won't dig into those weeds too much, but do have a little bit of information on that. OCD is extremely commonly misused. Even with me, we used to have a joke when I was the executive officer of the local builders association. We had a couple of members that would ask me to break out my EOCD, executive officer CD, EOCD, and make sure something looked straight or whatever. And that's a perfect example. I am not OCD. I may have a smack of obsessive compulsive personality disorder, but I've never been diagnosed with it because it doesn't impede in functioning. People often describe a preference for neatness or order as being OCD. Totally not true. True OCD involves unwanted, intrusive thoughts, known as obsessions, that cause tremendous amounts of anxiety, leading individuals to perform repetitive behavior, which is the compulsion side of it, and that compulsion is to relieve the distress. So a good way to put it is obsess and check. And these behaviors are usually distressing and feel way beyond a person's control also. For example, I have a friend who, when they rise in the morning, they have to tap the floor a certain amount of times while they're turning around in a specific direction in a minimum number of circles, or their day is just wrong. They can't start their day. They can't function. That is a symptom of OCD. The excessive hand washing, because it's an obsessive fear of contamination from bodily fluids, germs, household chemicals, environmental pollutants, unwanted thoughts and mental images that run through the head all of the time. These are all perfectionism, which is a fear of making mistakes, and obsessive concern with being perfect. And that can be a fine line. A lot of people are perfectionists, and it's easy to take that out of context and go, oh, they must be OCD. No, a lot of people are perfectionists. Military people frequently come out of the military very regimented and very habit-oriented and very perfectionistic, but it doesn't mean they have OCD, and it also doesn't mean they have obsessive compulsive personality disorder. People experiencing OCD have a fear of something terrible happening and being responsible for causing harm. Good morning, Wade. Because they're not careful enough. They have an excessive fear regarding their partner and the flaws and qualities of the partner. Compulsions that come along with OCD with some of these things. Again, excessive washing and cleaning, repeating words or tasks, over-checking situations to make sure they didn't inflict harm on anyone or anything, rearranging things until they feel right, counting while doing a task, and praying to prevent harm. Like I said, so I have this one friend who, when they wake in the morning, if they don't tap the floor a certain number of times with the correct foot, or turn in circles a certain number of times, then their day is completely derailed. If anything happens to interrupt that, It's an issue, and it's not like it's something they would forget on a regular basis. I had another friend who was known for having Post-it notes on the wall that had numbers, and those Post-it notes were put in very particular orders, not necessarily numerically, but people like to kind of screw with that person by moving those Post-it notes around, and it would really cause major problems and panic, and because those things weren't right and they weren't how they left it. So it's extremely intrusive, and it's part of the OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, is part of the anxiety disorder, what's the word I want to say? Grouping. That's not the right word, but that's the one we're going to use. Cluster. Cluster's the word we want to use. OCD is part of the anxiety cluster. And again, I cannot stress enough, just because somebody's neat or rearranges the dishwasher after you filled it does not, good morning, Miss Kayla, does not make them OCD. OCD, again, is extremely intrusive, and it impedes in daily function. Obsessive compulsive disorder, personality disorder, is a little bit different. It tends to lean towards perfectionism, neglecting relationships due to being a workaholic, hoarding money for worst case scenarios, obsessing over ethics, not wanting to assign tasks without a guarantee that they'll be done perfectly. Kayla, you're so funny. And they can be very rigid. But again, military people come out of the military like that, and that doesn't mean they have obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And again, that's a personality disorder versus OCD, which is an anxiety disorder. So again, just because you're a little neat and you're blaming it on your OCD, you may actually be misusing that term, and you probably are. And it's possible that you are reducing the importance or significance for somebody that actually does have OCD. So keep that in mind. All right. I'm going to actually skip what I have listed for number 4, and I'm going to change the order of these two things, because number 4 is one that really seems to be heavy duty these days. So I'm going to go to number 5 first. I'm going to talk about ADHD or ADD briefly, because this is still kind of a thorn in my side, because we won't even go there. But attention deficit hyperactivity disorder boils down to, how is it misused? People describe themselves as ADHD or ADD when they're easily distracted or find it hard to focus momentarily. I'm postmenopausal. I had a news flash. I find it hard to focus all the time. I do not think I have adult onset ADHD. ADHD is a neurodevelopment disorder that's marked by persistent inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity that can affect, and again, here are those magic words, impede daily function across various settings, such as work, school, and relationships. Now, with that said, lack of ability to focus, easy distraction also is something that comes along with depression. It comes along with anxiety. It can come along with your diet being off for the day, having had too much caffeine. There's a lot of things that this can come along with. But if it's not something that persists in a consistent pattern with these symptoms, not just an occasional distraction or even a week's worth of distraction, but something that persists in a consistent pattern that affects organization, focus, self-regulation in lasting, significant ways, then it's not ADHD or ADD. Kayla, you're funny. So it's not simply about being scattered or having occasional difficulty in focusing. Those things are normal. They're within the range of normalcy. God forbid we be normal. So ADHD, again, commonly misused. Somebody's a little hyperactive. They're ADHD. Even I've been guilty of being like, I cannot focus today. There's squirrels everywhere. Kayla, thanks for the squirrel. My ADHD is kicking in. It's not just because you're a little unfocused or a little squirrely on any given day does not mean you have ADHD. And again, speaking in that manner, sometimes it may feel like we're normalizing it when we're really not, because we're making it difficult for people that truly experience that disorder and suffer from that disorder to be treated and taken seriously. When we are using these kind of terms in a casual context all the time to describe personality traits instead of actual real disorders. So now I'm going to go to the last one. And this one really, I've been sitting on this topic for a long time, and I can't pinpoint the exact thing that finally tipped the scale last week. And I was like, I need to talk about this. But narcissistic personality disorder. We all, myself included, have referred to someone or posted memes on Facebook about someone being narcissists. You're welcome, Marie. I'm not sure what you're thanking me for, but you're welcome. Narcissistic personality disorder is a real thing. And it does not look like what we think it does. And hence the pop culture references when I was posting about this episode about Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride saying, I do not think that word means what you think it means. So we have a tendency, and I'm going to say we as a collective statement, we as a people have a tendency to use the term narcissist to describe pretty much anybody that's self-centered, possibly anybody that doesn't agree with us on any given subject at any given time, or somebody that blames us for something. Not it, Kayla. Okay, just to be clear, nobody's being singled out here, except me. I will routinely single myself out if I know I'm guilty of something. I've used the term incorrectly. I absolutely have. Although admittedly, I do have a little bit more background than the average person. So sometimes if I break out that term, and I've been much more cautious of it in the last year or two, sometimes if I break out that term, it's because I truly suspect that I'm seeing actual real narcissistic tendencies. But guess what? Guess who's not licensed and can't actually make that diagnosis? This girl right here. I'm studying to be licensed, but I'm not there yet. So total disclaimer, I am not licensed and cannot make that diagnosis. I may see things that stand out as red flags, but that doesn't mean I'm right. So let's talk about narcissistic personality disorder. Again, the term narcissist is often used to describe anyone who seems arrogant or self-centered. That's a lot of people, y'all. A lot of people come across that way. The reality is that narcissistic personality disorder is a personality disorder that involves a pervasive pattern of grandiosity, which is a constant need for admiration and a lack of empathy. Generally, those three items kind of need to go together. They need to believe basically that they're God's gift, for lack of a better way to put it. I'm sure there's a better example, but that's the best one I've got right now. And a lot of times this can manifest in, I'm the best thing that ever happened to you. You're not going to find anybody else like me, but not always. Those are very layman examples. A constant need for admiration. The truth of the matter is that narcissistic personality disorder, as arrogant as they are, and as much as they seem to need admiration and praise, or an ego stroke, it is actually born from a lack of self-esteem, or a very fragile self-esteem that they are constantly trying to protect, and therefore need constant admiration and ego stroking. We all know somebody like that, right? But that doesn't mean they're actually a narcissist. Another key point here is the lack of empathy. It is a very complex disorder. Good morning, Miss Patricia. That affects relationships and self-perception profoundly. It is not just about arrogance. It is not just about self-centeredness. I know a lot of people in my world that are self-centered. They think about themselves first. They think about everything else that's going on in terms of their own experience. Guess what? Most of us are like that in some form or fashion. But that doesn't mean they're narcissistic. And I'll be honest with you, if this is a topic you want me to dig into any of these further, where I take one of these items, one of these diagnoses, and I do a whole Wellness Wednesday episode just on that, because we don't have time to get into the weeds today on this, then I'm happy to do that. Drop a comment, shoot me a message, say, I'd really like to know more about this, and I will try to expand on that particular topic in a future Wellness Wednesday. But again, I cannot stress enough that narcissistic personality disorder goes beyond everyday self-centered behavior impacting relationships and the person's sense of identity. it impedes in normal daily function. And of course, normal is a very loose and relative term in this day and age. But again, celebrities that we see that are self-centered, that are bragging about themselves, people we know that are arrogant and just kind of, rub you the wrong way, that doesn't mean they're narcissistic. It is a very real disorder, and it has a lot of very complex pieces and components. And just because, our ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend doesn't agree with us and blamed us for everything doesn't make them narcissistic. That's probably the most common misuse that I see. And that's really a term that we need to kind of tone down the way we use it, because we use it a lot. We use it in reference to celebrities. We use it in reference to our neighbors, our coworkers, our exes, our currents, our political candidates, all of those things. And it's just not, that's probably, in my opinion, that one and bipolar are probably the two most misused terms that have the potential to do the most damage when they're misused. So I'm running a little bit long. You guys know I try to keep this to around 30 minutes. Yes, that's true, Kayla, but sometimes they are. But it may not be for, like I said, I'm not licensed. I know a lot of those signs. I know what a lot of those red flags are, but even I'm not at liberty to say someone is, because I'm not licensed. I don't have that intimate knowledge of all those bits and pieces. So I have learned, and I was guilty of throwing that word around, but I have learned to back off on that and tone it down, because it is a real disorder. And I don't want to stigmatize people that don't have that disorder by placing that label on them, or what's the word I'm looking for? Reduce the seriousness for those that actually do. Good morning, Miss Heidi. For those that actually do have that disorder. So why does all this matter? Why are we talking about this? Well, kind of like I just said, when we are misusing these mental health conditions and terms and diagnoses, we are trivializing the experiences of people who genuinely live with these conditions. We're also unnecessarily bringing attention to people's personality traits who don't have the disorder through that labeling. So casual misuse makes it harder for those with the disorders to feel understood and seek support. And it also leads to isolation or reluctance to pursue help, which contributes to and perpetuates the stigma. So proper understanding and responsible language can help us foster empathy and compassion in our communities, and also reduce the misunderstandings, because there's mass misunderstandings about all of these disorders. And yes, we have huge mental health issues in this nation, but not everybody that's a little stressed out is experiencing anxiety. And not everybody that's having a little bit of a mood swing because of something terrible that just happened is bipolar. And not everybody that's a little neat and organized and regimented, hi, Miss Rebecca, is OCD. And not everybody that's a little squirrely and easily distracted is. You see what I'm saying? We need to understand these terms and use them properly and use the proper language so that we are not reducing the significance for the people that do have these disorders and need our empathy and need our help and need that recognition. And also so that we're not labeling the rest of the world because somebody had a bad day and had a few mood swings because they had a reaction to epinephrine, and labeling them bipolar, in the way that we speak to them or the way that we speak to other people, because that in of itself, when we label people like that, also, if they are really truly experiencing a problem, it reduces their likelihood of coming forward and seeking help. So that's probably about the best way I can say it. And again, I cannot stress enough, these 5 disorders that I covered, if you want to see me dig into each of them individually, there's still only so much I can dig in a 30-minute Wellness Wednesday, 30 to 35, because we all know I run a little over. Send me a message, drop a comment, let me know. If I need to do a little series where I cover each one of these. So I'm going to wrap it up because your time is valuable. And like I said, we could get into the weeds on these all day. But let me just remind you of these few things before I let you go. Choose your words carefully. Don't use, like I said, I'm not licensed yet. I'm studying, but I'm not licensed yet. So this is as much for people like me as it is for anyone else. Don't use diagnostic labels if you haven't been, to explain yourself if you haven't actually been diagnosed. Instead of saying, I'm so OCD, say things like, I like things organized. I prefer things organized. I like things neat. Carla, I vote yes. You're so funny. Okay, so Carla votes yes for expanding into these topics. Number 2, educate yourself and others. When you hear someone misusing these terms, if you're up to it, and I don't always recommend this because some people can be pretty confrontational, offer gentle corrections and share the insights that you do have. Especially if you are suffering from that mental health condition. Kayla, perfect. I am color coordinated. I love it. That's perfect. You always got to bring those colors in here. Anyway, so if you have insight because you actually do suffer from that condition, if it feels right, you can gently correct those people. However, again, in this day and age, a lot of people are very confrontational and don't respond well to people that disagree with them. So with that said, use that judiciously. However, visit mental health websites. I will absolutely tell you, if it's something you don't understand, visit mental health websites, bona fide mental health websites, or research professional articles about these conditions. 3 great resources, NAMI.org. And then you can either look at your local site based on your zip code, or you can look at the national site, which has a lot of information about all of these disorders and a whole bunch more. You can go on YouTube and look at NAMI videos where there's a lot of testimonials of people talking about what it's like to live with those disorders. And the NAMI Citrus Facebook page usually has one of those videos at least once a week. SAMHSA, it's SAMSHA, and I'm still not sure I'm pronouncing it right, but there's a lot. It's a mental health website that also has a lot of information. And then you can use Google Scholar to research actual scholarly articles on these kind of subjects all day long. So if you don't know, learn. If it's something you're interested in learning so that you can speak accurately about these items, then visit those mental health websites, research professional articles, do your due diligence. I personally am one that if I don't know, I tend to not weigh in. I just keep my mouth shut. I also usually don't correct people unless I'm feeling very comfortable in conversation with them, especially online, because it just goes nowhere. So number 3, we all agree that mental health is a huge issue right now across the nation, probably across the world. So the more we can learn and use those terms correctly, the more we can be empathetic for the people that are actually experiencing those conditions in an intrusive manner. So that empathy is super important. We have to break the stigma, and the only way we can break the stigma and encourage people to seek help for these disorders is if we stop misusing these terms and actually know what we're talking about. And of course, the final reminder I would have is, I'm not sure what you're saying that to, Kayla. If you have any of what I just described in these 5 disorders, anything that I just described to the point where it is distressing and intrusive in your normal daily function, please seek help. NAMI offers support groups across the nation. There's probably other support groups near you. It's something you can Google. You can go to NAMI. You can find your local affiliate. There are virtual support groups. You can go to your primary care physician and ask for a referral to a counselor. If this is something if you have something that's going on that's truly impeding in your daily function, I encourage you to seek help. Don't worry about the stigma, because the more we know and the more we understand about these real conditions, the more likely we are to be able to speak about them intelligently and not use them casually, and have empathy for those that truly are suffering from these disorders. So with that said, I have 1 vote for expanding on these. Again, you can message me, you can comment if you would like to see any one of these disorders expanded on, or all of them. And just let's try to find a way to not dilute the seriousness of these disorders and not use them as terms to describe personality traits in the person that we had to deal with earlier today that disagreed with us or picked on us or whatever. There's a lot of different things going on. Not all of them are actual mental health conditions. It's important that we start using these terms correctly. Okay, if you found this helpful, please share. Thank you so much for being here. Again, hashtag replay in the comments if you see this afterwards. Share if you found it helpful, and drop a comment or message me if you would like to see me expand on any or all of these, because it's important information. And, you know, again, you remember those old after school commercials or whatever they were, the more you know. Here I am, hashtag the more you know. I'm learning every day just like you. I just like to share what I'm learning because I think it helps all of us. So with that said, I hope you have a fabulous Wednesday. I will drop the link to last week's in the comments. I look forward to seeing whatever comments or questions I missed while I was live, and I will see you next week. In the meantime, be well and have a fabulous day. Bye.